Karina woke up suddenly, drenched in sweat. In a moment of relief, she realized that she was at home with Kostya beside her. Trying not to disturb him, she quietly attempted to leave the room. She couldn't bear the thought of him giving her that pitiful look again and asking if she needed to see a doctor. It had happened before, and the memory left a sour taste in her mouth. Just like today, she had experienced that haunting nightmare. It had plagued her for years. Strangely, when she was young and had just lost her parents, she never had any dreams. And yet now, as an adult, some might even say a successful woman, that nightmare resurfaced repeatedly. Every time she woke up, screaming. She had been dating Stepan at one point, even planning to marry him. But one night, unable to bear it any longer, he had abruptly gotten up from bed. However, instead of comforting her like he used to, he simply packed his things into a bag. Trembling, Karina asked, "Stepan, what are you doing?" He looked at her with anger in his eyes, responding harshly, "I'm leaving. I can't live like this anymore. Several times a month, you wake me up with those abnormal screams. I can't handle it. It's driving me crazy." "Will you?" Karina questioned, her voice shaking. "Yes, I'm already on the verge of it. You've been acting crazy for a while now, and you refuse to acknowledge it. I don't want a mentally unstable wife. I don't want children born to a woman who's not in her right mind." With that, Stepan stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Strangely, the dream of collapsing buildings, exploding volcanoes, and a cloud of ash covering fleeing people, including her parents, ceased to haunt her. For an entire year, Karina had been healing from the pain caused by Stepan's actions. She had spent the year longing for the recurring dream, but it never came. Stepan never reached out again, and Karina gradually began to relax. Then, an opportunity arose for her to make a change in her career path. She was offered a chance to relocate to the other side of the country, where the company was opening a new branch. Without any hesitation, Karina agreed to this opportunity. After all, what did she have to lose? Her apartment was rented, and the house where she grew up with her parents was situated in a village nearly 100 kilometers away. She had entrusted the caretaking of the house to a neighbor, but to be honest, Karina wouldn't have been devastated if it had burned down. The pain of returning there had been too overwhelming for her in the past. It was a place where her family had once lived together, with her grandmother Rita, her father's mother, her father, and herself. They had bought that house when Karina was a baby, as doctors recommended that she live closer to nature due to her health issues. Her parents were both lifeguards, not just regular rescuers, but ones who were deployed to combat large-scale emergencies like fires, accidents, and earthquakes. Every time they embarked on a business trip, Grandmother Rita would baptize them and pray for their safety while shedding quiet tears that Karina would overhear. On that particular day, Grandma had decided to make Karina's favorite pancakes with cottage cheese. The kitchen was filled with the sound of the television in the background. Suddenly, Grandma froze, her eyes fixated on the news being broadcasted. Karina didn't fully grasp the details of what was being said, but she could sense the tension in the room. The pancake that Grandma was in the process of rolling up unraveled in her hands, and the cottage cheese within it slowly tumbled out, landing on the floor. The sight of that fallen curd scared Karina so deeply that she would forever associate it with that moment. Since then, she had never touched cottage cheese again. Karina's gaze flickered fearfully towards her grandmother, who was silently fixated on the screen. Her grandmother's vacant eyes sent shivers down Karina's spine. Just as the uneasy silence loomed, the doorbell interrupted their thoughts. In haste, Karina rushed to answer it, only to be met with a man donning the same uniform as her parents once had. This sight sent a chill through her young, fragile frame, as she was left to navigate the world at just 14 years old, without her parents by her side. After the man departed, Karina's grandmother remained eerily quiet, leaving Karina to shed her tears in solitude. The fear and pain weighed heavily upon her, making it difficult to fathom a life without her beloved mom and dad. As she gazed at the television, the images replaying of the swirling clouds of dust and ash, Karina hoped for the unthinkable, a sign of her parents' existence. Yet, her yearning went unanswered. Suddenly, a thud disrupted her thoughts, and Karina turned, emitting a piercing scream. Her grandmother lay motionless on the floor, her eyes fixed on a single spot. Instead of being sent to an orphanage, Karina found herself under the guardianship of her parents' boss's family, for which she was immensely grateful. They sought to compensate for the absence of her mom, dad, and grandmother by providing her with love and care. They even ensured she received an education at a prestigious university. Though they couldn't fully replace her family, their efforts prevented Karina from succumbing to despair. Overwhelmed by her emotions, Karina rushed into the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of water. As she sat down to collect her thoughts, she questioned fate. Why now? Why were these haunting dreams resurfacing just as she was starting a new relationship? She pondered these thoughts for a while, eventually glancing at her watch. Realizing that the sun would soon rise, she pondered the point of going back to bed. Instead, she decided to make breakfast, knowing that Kostya, her beloved, always started his day with a morning meal. Even if Karina herself couldn't muster an appetite, she would make sure he had something to eat. However, their roles reversed during their lunchtime rendezvous at the cafe, where Karina enjoyed a proper meal while Kostya settled for coffee and a small sandwich. This playful disagreement often filled their conversations with laughter. Karina prepared a delicious breakfast, including an omelet and some sandwiches, before going to wake up Kostya. However, to her surprise, he was already awake. "Hello, darling," Karina greeted him with a smile. "Hi, what are you doing up so early?" Kostya asked, curious about her early morning activities. Karina observed him closely, wondering if he had heard her earlier conversation or if he was simply curious. "I couldn't sleep," Kostya replied, offering an explanation for his early wakefulness. They sat down together for breakfast, and Karina even poured herself a cup of coffee. "How are you feeling today?" she asked, trying to strike up a conversation. "Karina, I'm actually planning to go to my parents' house today," Kostya revealed. "Okay, well, I'll finally have the chance to clean out the closet," Karina replied, not wanting to intrude on his plans. Kostya didn't live with her full-time, but he often stayed over. It seemed that both Karina and Kostya were content with this arrangement, or so it appeared. Karina, who was 26, desired not just a successful career, but also a fulfilling family life. However, Kostya remained silent on the topic. There were no hints or indications that he was ready to commit after 6 months of dating. Karina hesitated to propose to him herself, wondering if that was the appropriate next step. Kostya was the first to leave. Despite working in the same company, their offices and areas were different. Time flew by quickly until lunch, and Karina worked so diligently that she even managed to snatch a little free time for herself. Assuming Kostya had finished his pie and left without waiting, she hurriedly walked towards the cafe. As she exited, she spotted Kostya standing a short distance away, engaged in conversation with another girl. "Your crazy girl wasn't at lunch," Karina overheard Kostya say. "I don't know," the girl responded. "She was yelling and running around earlier. I'm fed up with it." "Why don't you get rid of her?" Kostya replied, "It's quite pitiful. Who else would want her with such instability? Besides, she doesn't even think she needs help. And if you tell her, she'll just get angry." Karina recoiled, deeply shocked by what she had heard. Hastily, she retreated to her office. Later that evening, Kostya called, as he always did when he didn't stay the night at her place, to bid her good night. The phone sat on her desk, spinning, while Karina stared at it without answering. When the vibrations finally subsided, she messaged him, "I'm in a psychiatric institution. Please do not call again." Despite several attempts from Kostya to reach out, he eventually sent a text message. "You really are crazy." Karina made the decision to delete Kostya's number from her phone. As soon as she did, she immediately felt a sense of relief wash over her. Somehow, she was certain that she wouldn't have the recurring nightmares about him anymore. And she was right. The next morning, Karina woke up feeling cheerful and alert. She stood in front of the mirror, looking at her reflection, and uttered to herself, "Well, time to start a new life." She arrived at work as if nothing had happened, engaging in cheerful conversations and flashing smiles to her colleagues. Instead of going out for lunch, she decided to skip it, thinking she needed to shed a few extra pounds. However, right after lunch, Kostya unexpectedly showed up at the office. "Karina, can we talk?" he asked, looking at her with uncertainty. Karina gazed back at him, calm and even kind. "About what?" she questioned. "About us? What's been going on?" Kostya inquired, his curiosity evident. Karina sighed, mustering her strength. "Kostya, I beg you. Why did you come here? You don't love me, so you shouldn't care. Are you here just because it's the right thing to do? That's quite foolish, don't you think? You're an educated adult, yet you're succumbing to societal conventions." Kostya stood there, at a loss for words. He couldn't believe that Karina didn't seem to care. It was a blow to his ego. He attempted to speak again. "So what about you now?" Karina looked at him, genuinely perplexed. "Me? I don't understand the question. Kostya, of course, I'm grateful that you spent 6 months with some other woman, but I managed to live without you for 26 years. I think I'll be just fine. Now please go, it's already working hours." She beamed at him, her smile radiant. Kostya abruptly turned around and made his way towards the door. Karina watched him leave and then focused her attention on the stack of papers in front of her. And what was that all about? She wondered aloud. The unexpected voice right next to her ear startled Karina. "Svetka, how many times do I have to ask you not to sneak up on me like a cat? You'll give me a heart attack." Svetka, Karina's friend, chuckled in response. "Karinka, really? Did you break up with Kostik? Where are the tears? He's so charming." Svetka playfully imitated her previous words, the same one she had said when Karina first started dating Kostya. For some reason, Svetka had taken an instant dislike to him. She referred to him as a pompous idiot and refused to visit Karina if Kostya was around. Karina couldn't understand why Svetka couldn't stand him. "Svet, you're my friend, right?" They were strolling through town together. "Of course, I'm your friend. Who was there for you when you first arrived, took you in, and made you feel warm?" Svetka laughed. Karina reminisced about her arrival in this cold and unwelcoming city. She had gotten lost, but luckily, Svetka happened to be in the cab that was sent to her when she called the office. Svetka immediately took it upon herself to help and ended up bringing Karina to her place. The city turned out to be great, but Karina was tired and the weather wasn't the best. Svetka's sincerity and cheerfulness won Karina over, and from the very first moment they met, Svetka had taken her under her wing. "But why are you asking?" Karina stopped to face Svetka. "Because I don't understand why my best friend can't stand my boyfriend. Don't you want me to be happy?" "Me? No," Svetka replied defensively. "Because your boyfriend shouldn't be your boyfriend. He's not right for you. He only loves himself." Svetka's voice carried a hint of resentment. Her friend, Sveta, was known for her impulsive and sincere nature. She always spoke her mind, which earned her both respect and dislike from others. Sveta was originally from the far suburbs, but had recently moved to the city, thanks to her parents buying her a one-bedroom apartment. Despite owning a car, Sveta's mother worried about her driving in the dark winter evenings. Now, Sveta stood tall before Karina, like a kite ready to soar. Karina pondered on what she could say to calm her down. Should she agree with Sveta's thoughts? However, time was running out, and Karina knew she had to act quickly. "Svetka, go to work. After we're done, let's grab a bottle of champagne to celebrate. And I promise to tell you everything. Karina tried to appease her friend. Later that evening, as Sveta listened to all the details, she looked at Karina thoughtfully. Do you have time off? Sveta asked, sensing an opportunity for something extraordinary. Yes, I have some, Karina admitted reluctantly, realizing she was caught. It seemed unlikely that she would be able to escape whatever scheme Sveta had in mind. Sveta, I'm not going anywhere. Last time, we nearly drowned because you were convinced that those who hadn't rafted on kayaks hadn't truly experienced life. Karina recalled the traumatic weekend when Sveta had convinced her to try kayaking. If it weren't for Karina's athleticism, they might not have made it out safely. Karina had to hold onto a log to prevent being carried away by the strong current, and she also had to assist Sveta since she was a weak swimmer. Karina had wanted to scold her friend for what she put them through that day. Well, we didn't die, did we? Everything turned out fine. What an adventure. You'll never forget it. Sveta replied cheerfully, seemingly unaffected by the near disaster they had faced. That was an unforgettable moment. Karina couldn't believe her eyes as she saw that same spark in Sveta's eyes once again. Come on, no need to scream. I'm not going to force you anywhere, Karina reassured her. Let's just go to my great-grandmother's house, Sveta suggested. She lives by a peaceful lake, with a forest nearby. It's absolutely stunning, and there's not a single person in sight. Doesn't she live with her parents? Karina inquired. No, Sveta replied. Actually, she's not even my grandmother, but my great-grandmother. I'm not sure how old she is, but we should definitely visit her. Well, I'm not sure how to explain it. She's some kind of witch. That's why she lives far away from everyone. Karina burst into laughter. Sveta, are you serious? A sorceress? Sveta smirked mischievously. Karina, sometimes you just have to look beyond appearances, you know? Karina let out a sigh. Just as long as her sorcery doesn't involve snakes, lakes, or wolves, I suppose I'm open to it. But I'm keeping an eye on you. If anything happens, I'm leaving immediately. Karina was grateful to Sveta. She had always been tough and resilient, but deep down, there was still a lingering resentment. After all, was it her fault that she had nightmares? Why did she have to be treated differently because of them? Would she always be alone because of these dreams? Svet, maybe I should see a doctor, Karina suggested. They could prescribe some medication, right? Sveta scoffed. You should send your boyfriends to the doctor instead. They're the ones who need it. Karina sighed. No, they just run away when their girlfriend needs support. Men, oh my God. Karina and her friend were deep in conversation about doctors when they realized they had taken a wrong turn while walking. They had been following a path through the forest for an hour when Sveta admitted to getting lost. Sveta, I thought you said you knew a shortcut, exclaimed Karina. I've driven here before, but I must have taken a wrong turn somewhere, replied Sveta, feeling frustrated. Well, why don't you just use the navigator on your phone? Karina suggested. What navigator? Sveta asked. There's never been any connection out here. Karina sighed, realizing they should have taken the road in the first place. There's no point in talking about it now. The trail is overgrown, and I have no idea where to turn. Looks like we'll have to walk. Sveta was immediately resistant. No way, I'm not walking. There could be wolves around here. Karina chuckled. The local wolves would love to have you for dinner, skin and bones. As they continued to argue, Sveta accidentally hit the car's nose on a tree, causing them to come to a sudden stop. Well, now we're definitely here, Sveta said sarcastically. The two friends got out of the car and surveyed the surroundings, trying to figure out their next move. Sveta nervously bit her fingernail while Karina urged her to think of a solution. Why is it that every time we plan something, it turns into an adventure, and not a safe one at that? Karina wondered aloud, growing anxious. Karina, why do you always have to yell like a bitch? Sveta retorted. I know this area like the back of my hand. Oh really? Karina challenged. Then show us where to go and how. Before Sveta could respond, they heard a loud crunching sound, like a broken branch. The girls shrieked in fear and quickly ran back to the safety of the car. A shadow fell on the windshield, causing them to squeeze their eyes shut. They then heard a cautious knock on the window. It was strange, as if a bear wouldn't normally knock. Karina cautiously opened one eye and saw a man staring at them through the glass. He had a mocking expression on his face. "Lost, huh, beauties?" the man asked in a teasing tone. Svetka searched and searched, until finally she exclaimed, "Igor, we need your help." She jumped out of the car and wrapped her arms around his neck. Igor chuckled, saying, "Svetka, you're a grown woman now. Why are you throwing yourself at everyone's neck?" "But you're not everyone," she replied excitedly. "Karina, meet my childhood friend, my best childhood friend Igor. We used to steal apples and strawberries from Grandma Efimovna's garden together." Igor took Karina's hand and smiled. "Don't listen to her. She did the stealing while I kept watch, and then she'd quietly cry in fear behind the corner." Svetka burst into laughter. "Igor, what are you doing here in the forest?" Svetka asked. "The same question could be asked of you," Igor responded. "We were just about to ask that," Svetka giggled. "We were on our way to visit Grandma. We thought we could take a shortcut, but we got lost." "Svet, when was the last time you walked through the woods?" Igor asked. "I don't remember," Svetka admitted. "Maybe about 3 years ago." "I see. Let me see what you've done here," Igor suggested. He sat down in front of the car, and Karina watched him with admiration. He didn't show off or try to be someone he wasn't. He was genuine and strong. His muscles rippled beneath his black t-shirt. He took off his windbreaker jacket, revealing a belt with ammunition, like that worn by hunters. Karina looked around and noticed a gun placed by a nearby tree. "Do you have the keys to the car?" Igor inquired. "Yeah," Svetka replied with a nod. Igor got behind the wheel and confidently drove the car through the forest, reaching a large clearing within 5 minutes. On one side there was a forest, and on the other, a picturesque lake. Karina's mouth dropped open in awe. This place resembled an illustration from a fairy tale book she used to read as a child. She stepped out of the car, in awe of the ethereal beauty surrounding her. Igor gently guided her towards the lake, wanting her to behold its magnificence. He clapped his hands, startling the swans hidden among the grass, causing them to take flight into the sky. Karina stood frozen, unable to believe what she was seeing. "It doesn't happen," she murmured in disbelief. Igor turned around, facing the direction of someone approaching. "And there's Semyonovna," he said. Both girls turned their gaze to where Igor was looking. Their grandmother hurried towards them, dressed in a light-colored kerchief, a blue apron, and a long skirt. It was clear that she was the grandmother. There was no other way to describe her. She could have been anywhere from 70 to 90 years old. "Svetlana, what took you so long?" "I've already sent Igor to find out where you went," she said, enveloping her granddaughter in a warm embrace. Svetka pulled away for a moment, surprised by her grandmother's foresight. "Grandma, how did you know we were coming?" she asked. "Now, my child, how could I not feel that my family is coming?" her grandmother replied with a smile. Karina looked at her grandmother with wide eyes, her astonishment evident. Her grandmother chuckled. "Don't be afraid, dear. I don't bite. My name is Agrippina Semyonovna, and you?" she asked Karina. "Karina," she replied. "Good. Let's hurry then. The pies are getting cold," her grandmother said, prompting them to move. Svetka jumped up excitedly. "My favorite, the ones with duck," she exclaimed. The old woman smiled warmly. "Of course, your favorite. Thank Igor for the duck. As soon as he heard you were coming, he brought the fattest one," she said. Sveta glanced mischievously at Yegor and asked, "When did you find out that I was coming, Yegor?" He shrugged his shoulders and replied, Semyonovna mentioned it during lunch the day before yesterday. Sveta chuckled and said, "Funny, we only decided to come in the evening." "Grandma, they might burn you at the stake like a witch." Grandma laughed and replied, "Who needs me, old?" Karina loved being here. It was so peaceful and beautiful. That evening, she and Sveta went to the lake. "Svet, who is Yegor? Does he live around here?" Karina asked. Sveta explained, "He used to live here when we were kids. We were really good friends. But then, around 10 years old for me and 15 for him, they moved away. Now he's back, but I don't know why or how long he's staying. He promised us kebabs tomorrow, so I'll ask him everything." "Why do you want to know?" Karina blushed and replied, "Just curious, that's all." Sveta teasingly shook Karina and said, "Wait a minute, my friend. What's going on? Could it be?" But Karina got angry and pushed her away. "Sveta, stop it. Don't act like a little girl," Karina scolded. "Sveta," Karina exclaimed, "it's love at first sight?" Karina dismissed Sveta's words and said, "Come on, stop talking nonsense." "You know, for the first time, I actually approve of your choice," Sveta said smugly. "And you know what? I think he's been keeping an eye on you too." Karina replied dismissively, "Oh, whatever you say." The 5 days off went by quickly. Karina realized that her fondest memory from this trip would be Yegor. For the first time in her life, she had met a true man, the kind that any woman would dream of. However, Yegor didn't make any advances towards her, even though Karina was certain that he liked her. He joked, grilled kebabs for them, and even took them fishing. After that experience, Karina solemnly swore that she would give her entire salary to any man who could figure out how to get rid of all the mosquitoes. On the final day, Yegor decided to leave early. "I'm also about a vacation, so I'm leaving tonight," he said. "But don't worry, we'll definitely see each other again." Karina watched as he disappeared into the forest, feeling a mix of emotions. She turned to her grandmother, who was looking at her with a penetrating gaze. "Let's go, Davanka. We'll talk and drink tea," her grandmother said. Setka wanted to join them, but her grandmother stopped her. "Granddaughter, don't be offended, but we need to have a one-on-one conversation," her grandmother explained. "Isn't that why you brought your friend along?" "Yes, Grandma," Karina replied. "I'm going for a walk by the lake." Karina was both curious and nervous as she followed her grandmother. Setka seemed to have ears everywhere, always eager to listen in. As they sat down for tea, the old woman asked, "Tell me, what troubles you?" Karina hesitated before responding, "It's not much, really. I often have dreams, nightmares even, about my parents' death." "How frequently do you have these dreams?" her grandmother inquired. "Mainly when I start dating someone or even when I'm about to get married," Karina admitted. "I wake up screaming, and they think I'm crazy." Her grandmother nodded knowingly. "They react like that, but what about when you're not with this person? Do you dream about him then?" "No, never," Karina replied. "Do you think it's my parents trying to send me a message?" Her grandmother shook her head. "No, it's not about your parents. It's your own subconscious. Deep down, you know that you don't want to be with these men, but you struggle to express it. So your mind creates this narrative to protect you. At night, when the conscious mind sleeps, the soul tries to push away those you don't desire. But don't worry, my child. You'll find someone you truly love and marry much sooner than you think. And when you do, you won't scream in your sleep because you'll genuinely be in love with your husband." Grandmother spoke, and Karina felt her eyelids drooping. The old woman said softly, lulling Karina into a sleepy state, "You go to sleep. Go to sleep now, child. Go to sleep and see what you dream about. Take a good look." Karina drifted off, her dreams taking her to a familiar place. When Karina woke up abruptly, she found herself back at the table with her grandmother. "Oh, how did I fall asleep?" she mumbled. Confused, she tried to recall her dream. "Karina, who did you meet in your dream?" her grandmother asked with curiosity. "Oh, you can't imagine. I was talking to my grandmother," Karina exclaimed. And I felt so good, so happy to see her. She's just as she was. Who else? Her grandmother inquired. Our neighbor. I don't remember him well. I was a little girl when he died, Karina responded, trying to recall more details. And Granny Sonia. She lived across the street. She died right after we found out. After my grandmother, anyway. Anything else? Grandma Agrippina's eyes turned dark, from blue to pure black, intensifying the conversation. I don't know. I don't remember. I don't think anyone else, Karina admitted. What did Grandma say? Her grandmother probed. She was angry. She said go home. Her parents are worried, Karina recounted, searching her memory for more details. And you? Her grandmother pressed further. I don't remember what I said, Karina replied, feeling a sense of unease. That's good. The old woman's demeanor suddenly shifted back to normal. Karina, listen to me. I'm rarely wrong, but now I'm afraid of being wrong, her grandmother admitted. You've met everyone who died. You know, the ones you knew. All of them. But your parents didn't come to see you? Yeah, why not? Karina questioned, feeling a pang of sadness. I don't think they're among the dead, but I don't see them among the living either. There's no thread that should bind you together, her grandmother explained, her voice filled with concern. You see, they're not dead, and if they're alive, they don't know you. How's that? Karina asked, feeling a mix of confusion and worry. That's something I can't say for sure. I've told you everything I know, her grandmother replied softly, her gaze filled with uncertainty. Lost in her thoughts, Karina's attention was abruptly drawn to someone bumping into her at the cafe. It was Kostya, appearing unexpectedly on her first day there. Karen, let's have a conversation. Where have you been all this time? You disappeared without telling anyone, and I must admit, I felt offended. Kostya looked at her playfully, causing Karina's good mood from the trip to dissipate. She realized that she had made a mistake in thinking she loved this sweet man. Kostya, there's really nothing left to talk about between us. We were wrong to believe that we could make something work. Karina, my patience has its limits. I'm warning you, I could take offense. Seriously, if that's what makes sense to you. Karina wanted to punch that narcissistic jerk, but instead, she smiled, using Svetka's epithet. Kostya, stay away from me for good. Is that clear enough for you? She walked away, leaving Kostya staring after her in confusion. What happened to her? She was so different now, so strong-willed. It was always the pushy ones that annoyed him the most. Maybe they should give it another try. Okay, he had work to do, but after work, he would try to make things right with her. Karina found it difficult to focus on work. Her mind was filled with thoughts of what the old lady had told her. By the end of the day, she had made up her mind. When her boss saw her, he said, "There are no more days off, and even if there were, don't bother asking." Karina sat across from him, determined. I really need this time off. It's important. Otherwise, I might have to quit. What's going on, Karina? Where are you going? I need to go home. Something has come up related to my parents. It's hard to explain, but a week would be enough. You're the best boss in the world, Karina exclaimed, grateful for his understanding. She hurriedly made arrangements, booking her plane ticket and quickly returning home to pack. She had to catch her flight at the airport. Karina, a voice called after her. Kostya, what now? She asked, exasperated. We need to talk, he insisted. Please, not now. Actually, not ever, she pleaded, trying to free her arm from his grip. You're going through a difficult time right now, which is why you might feel lost. But please know that I forgive you. Please leave me alone. She tried to pull her hand away, but Kostya held onto it tightly, causing her pain. Release the girl. Karina immediately recognized that voice. Kostya, surprised, let go of her hand, and Karina threw herself into Igor's arms. That's right, you men don't think, and you quickly find a replacement. Kostya wanted to add a curse word, but then he saw Igor's clenched fist and kept quiet. Igor, I only have 2 hours, then I'll be on a plane. A plane? Where are you going? It's a long story. Igor opened the car door for her. Get in and tell me the address, then I'll listen. She told him everything, starting from the moment the news had aired on TV years ago. Igor drove her to the airport, and there, he kissed her and said, I'll be waiting, but if you need my help, call me immediately. I'll come right away. Karina leaned in close to him. Just wait for me, he laughed. Yes, I've waited 30 years. A few more days won't hurt. The girl walked down the street slowly. This was where she used to go to school. And this was the turn her grandmother would take when going to the market on Saturdays. Sometimes she would take Karina along, as there was so much to buy. The girl disliked these trips. On Saturdays, she just wanted to sleep, not go to the market in the morning. Now, just 2 more houses, a turn, and she would see her house. It's probably in ruins now. Not because of old age, but because of vandals. Children liked to break windows, and people took anything that was left unattended. Karina, are you there? She came to a stop when she saw an old woman wearing a hat standing in front of her. To her surprise, it was her neighbor, Aunt Galia, who was supposed to be watching her house. I'm Aunt Galia, the old woman introduced herself. Suddenly, the neighbor burst into tears. At last, she exclaimed. Confused, Karina asked, Who told you? Why are they going crazy? Aunt Galia fell silent, her eyes widening. Karinavka, don't you know anything? She whispered. Karina's heart started pounding, and she screamed, What don't I know? Aunt Galia, tell me. But the neighbor couldn't find the words. She simply urged Karina to run home. Something clicked in Karina's mind. She realized she couldn't expect her mom and dad to be waiting for her at home. She picked up her pace and started running, awkwardly dragging her suitcase behind her. Finally, she arrived at what appeared to be her house. The windows were clean, and there were even flowers. Could she have found some long-lost relatives? It made sense. She must have had more than just one grandparent. She felt grateful that her parents had been looking for her and would be happy to see her. As she approached the gate, she noticed a woman sitting in the gazebo her father had built for her. Who was this woman? Could she be a relative or maybe a stranger who had purchased the house? Karina's heart skipped a beat. The woman resembled her mom. Could she be a sister? The thought crossed Karina's mind, influenced by the melodramas she enjoyed watching. Suddenly, the woman turned her head as if sensing something, and Karina realized she was blind, but she also recognized her. Mummy! Karina's scream was so piercing that it startled birds from the surrounding trees. Slowly, the woman rose to her feet, her gaze fixed on Karina and beyond. Karina? Karinavka? She called out. The girl rushed towards her, grabbing hold of her and embracing her tightly. Her tears flowed uncontrollably as she repeated the same word over and over again. Mommy, mommy, mommy. In response, the woman kissed her daughter's hair, softly uttering, My daughter, my daughter. Suddenly, someone else scooped Karina up in their arms, causing her consciousness to fade away. Later that night, they sat together at the table. Karina awoke from her slumber, hoping that it was not just another dream. As the emotions settled down and they sat hand in hand, Karina's father began to speak. 12 years ago, we experienced something similar, although our mission was slightly different back then, but it doesn't matter now. We were left behind, deemed unnecessary and even dangerous. For 5 years, we wandered without any identification. If we had reached out to others, they may have helped us, but it would have put our lives at risk. Eventually, my mother's vision started to deteriorate due to the trauma she had endured. We had no choice but to leave the mountains behind. He paused, a solemn expression on his face. We ended up in prison. Yes, in the eyes of that country, we had committed a crime against our own state. However, that's a tangent. 6 months ago, we were replaced by others who had committed similar offenses in our homeland. There have been significant changes here. It's not like it used to be. My mom has already undergone surgery, and the doctors are optimistic. We were searching for you, but in a normal way, like regular people. They instructed us to let go of everything that happened in the past. I discovered your town yesterday morning, although I didn't possess your phone number or exact address. However, my mom and I made the decision to come. It would have been impossible to find you otherwise. We have already purchased the tickets, and as for you, how? You haven't been here in 10 years. You didn't leave any way for anyone to reach you. It was challenging for me. I didn't want to, I couldn't. I sent money to Uncle Kolia to take care of my grandmother's grave, but your graves weren't there. I wouldn't have returned otherwise. But then I had a dream. My dear grandmother. All the people I knew who had already passed away were present, but you were not among them. So she told me that you are not among the deceased. Daughter, I don't know when or if I'll ever see you again, but I am certain that you are the most beautiful. Her mother gently caressed Karina's hand, and her father immediately added, Mother, never doubt that. They retired for the night, Karina in her room and her parents in theirs. Everything was just as it had been before, like it was all those years ago. Karina messaged her friend, My parents are alive. I will talk to you later. She promptly turned off her phone, knowing Svetka well. In the morning, Karina awoke to the sounds of voices and the clattering of dishes in the kitchen. She stretched and uttered a silent thank you to God. She had never felt this content. She picked up her phone and turned it on. Texts, missed calls, and more texts. Svetka had called 34 times. The only text she received said, Igor is following you. Karina jolted upright in bed, startled by a voice she heard coming from the kitchen. She was about to get up when suddenly the door swung open, revealing Igor holding a sandwich. Come on, sleepyhead, he said with a playful tone, or we'll eat all the sandwiches. For some reason, Karina burst into tears, alarming Igor. Why are you crying? He asked, confused. From behind Igor, Karina's father chimed in, Don't worry, Igor. Women are complicated beings. They cry when things are bad or when they're happy. How can anyone understand what's going on in their heads? Svetka, Karina's mother, joined the conversation. Igor, why are you stomping around like a bear? Bring the salad and don't drop it. Sveta, have I ever dropped anything? Igor protested. Well, everyone starts somewhere, Svetka replied nonchalantly. Sometimes I want to slap you, Igor retorted. Oh, you've been threatening that since you were a child, Svetka brushed off his comment. Mom, Dad, and the godmother are arguing again. A little girl approached Karina, eager to share some gossip. Igor turned around and remarked, Aunt Marinka, the little snitch. Mummy, Karina embraced the little girl, shooting a playful warning gesture at Igor. No, of course not. Daddy's just joking. They're coming, Karina exclaimed as she noticed a car approaching the house. Her father had gone to pick up her mother from the hospital today after her final operation. He had called earlier, shouting that everything went well. Igor scooped up Marina in his arms, the little girl having forgotten her earlier offense, and hugged her tightly. He then offered a helping hand to Karina, who was heavily pregnant with twins. Through the window, Karina caught a glimpse of her mother stepping out of the car. She looked around, touching things with her hands, before her gaze settled on Karina. There was a momentary pause as their eyes locked. Then her mother smiled and said, My daughter, I always knew you were beautiful.